No one should have to choose between their own safety and their pets. But nearly half of domestic abuse survivors delay leaving because they can't bring their pets with them. Purina is helping to create more pet-friendly domestic violence shelters through the Purple Leash Project, so survivors and their pets can escape and heal together. Visit Purina.com/purple to learn more.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
This episode is presented by State Farm. Having insurance isn't the same as having State Farm. It's like expecting the leadership of a team captain on the football field, but getting a sea captain. You wouldn't settle for just anything for your team. Shouldn't it be the same for your insurance? So don't settle for just any insurance when you can go with a leader. State Farm. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Hello everyone, I'm Chris Wynn. Welcome to another Matchday Howie the podcast as the lads travel to Old Trafford later today and we return to a traditional 3 o'clock kickoff on a Saturday afternoon, which is always nice. Very rarely have Sunderland played Manchester United while the lads are sitting 9 places above them in the league table. But even though United have their issues, and we had the brilliant Justin Moorhouse, who was of course young Kenny and Phoenix Knights this week, telling us all about that. But we do know this is a huge test for the lads. So to help me talk about the game ahead, we first up have Gavin Henderson. Hello, Gav.
Hello, mate. Yes, looking forward to this one. It's, as we said when we did the look back at old games with Man United, it's just got a proper feel about this one. Not to do down the teams we've already played, but this feels like the return to the Premier League to me. This feels like back in the day when you used to come up against the big boys. This is the first big test. So, and it'll, as we're about to talk about, it'll probably tell us where we're at if we can get a good result at Old Trafford. So, looking forward to every single second of it until I have to do the reaction and the optimism's probably been dampened. But right now, I'm optimistic.
Yeah, it was nice to do that memories one, wasn't it? You were starting to get a bit emotional about that cup game, weren't you?
Yeah, it was sort of opening old wounds to a degree and remembering that a cup run and specifically just that game. I think honestly, as I said in the pod, that is probably one of my best memories as a fan, being at that game. So it was just unbelievable. And do you know what it is as well? We didn't really talk about it in great deal, but like the games that we had against them under Allardyce as well and things like that. We have actually, when you think about it, Man United fans probably think about Sunderland and go, I can't even remember playing yous. But with us, it's slightly different because for the majority of our time as a Premier League club, they've been one of the top dogs. So you do remember them games a little bit more. And I think that's maybe why this has got a good feel about it. So yeah, we are back in the Premier League. We know this. We're doing pretty well, as we all know. But this just feels like our first big test, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And last but not least to join us today, we have Bomber. Hello, Bomber.
Hello, mate. It feels like it's all or nothing with me. I'm either on 6 times in a week or you don't hear from me in about 3 or 4. But yeah, good to be back and speaking with you.
Judith Chalmers, he's all over the world, jet setting and going on his holidays. That's the
I've
problem.
had a few weeks in the States. Nothing really to let Kirill and the lads know from a player's perspective. There's no one really in Colorado or Utah that's tearing up trees at the minute. So I've just let him know not to bother looking in those directions.
Yeah, it's your fault for having a good social life, whereas me and Gav were clearly on almost every single pod. But just memories of playing at Old Trafford, Bomber. What does it bring for you? Because actually, one thing we didn't mention on the Memories podcast was one of my early-ish memories when I was a teenager, getting thumped 5-0 and Eric Cantona flicking his collar up when he ripped the piss out of us and chipped Perez. But what memories have you got of Old Trafford?
I mean, it's predominantly the that part of that cup run, like Gav said, I can't really remember too many happy memories at Old Trafford. You guys are a lot more seasoned than I, and your memories go back a little bit further than mine. But
Thanks, cheers, mate.
I mean, in terms of longevity of being a Sunderland fan, mate, not in terms of our respective ages, because actually I'm older than Gav, so I can't remember if I'm older than you, but that's a debate for another day. We'll just pretend.
Let's just agree you are. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, the above and beyond everything else is that cup, the cup game. That I just echo what Gav said. Really, like that's one of my fondest and most memorable or most recalled memories, I guess. As a Sunderland fan, in not so recent times, obviously the playoff finals and everything else, and that's gone on in the last 2-3 years have been absolutely great, and there's been memories probably that have surpassed that and will cherish for the rest of my life. But all that, when we weren't quite so good and we took all the little kind of mini wins that we could, that cup run was definitely up there. And yeah, that semi-final, the final, both just front and center on my mind. And I didn't get to either of them. I wasn't lucky enough to do that, but I watched both of them on the telly, and was kicking, screaming, cheering just as much as if I was in the stadium with you.
It is funny that everyone says, everyone goes back to that memory because, of course, we got through, but it's easy to forget we actually got beat at Old Trafford on that 9-2-1. But anyway, look, let's get into the game ahead, because we'll go through a little bit from the press conference, because I think there was a few interesting things to come out of that. And as always, Nick Barnes kicked things off. And he asked about the development of this season's side compared to last season's team. And it's easy to forget from a development point of view, Gav, that it's two different teams for the manager to develop. But the answer he gave was talking about it being the same process. And he said this was the first time he said this in the press conference. He said it quite a few times. He said now it's the identity of the club to develop those players. So he said nothing changes in that we want to develop the players and the squad as we have been doing, which I found quite interesting.
Yeah, and I guess it doesn't matter how old the player is. There's still room for improvement. We specifically recruit players who I think we see almost as sponges. I don't ever feel like these days we sign someone and it's like, oh, he could be a bad apple. He thinks he's bigger than the club. We seem to be signing players who actually say this is an opportunity, and when that's the case, they come to Sunderland and they hear all about this coach and the ideas he's got. And they want to learn from him. And I think, to be honest, like we've actually been having a bit of a chat in our group chat, the Road Report one, just about how football's changed over the last few years. And I almost think that's been a force for the good. Whilst the games aren't as entertaining, I actually think in terms of coaching of players, I think it's improved a lot. And I think players now are more mouldable than they've ever been. Hence why we've got a squad full of players who can play about 10 positions. I think, tactically, the game has completely changed the way coaching's changed. So even now, you're looking at Alderete, who came from Getafe, who we were told had a manager. We were told they were the most physical team in La Liga. They were the most robust team in La Liga. And I remember seeing stats about Alderete, and people were saying, oh, there's a little concern here about some of his passing statistics, I've watched him on the ball, and I think he's absolutely brilliant. And it just shows, he's come into a completely different environment and being able to show a different side of his game at 27-year-old. Same for Nordi Mukiele. We thought he was going to be a right back, out and out right back. Actually played the majority of his games for PSG as a right back, right wing back, and a right midfield player. I watch him and I go, he's just an out and out powerhouse central defender, So it doesn't matter how old these players are; they can still be moulded, they can still be changed, and for the good. And we've seen that plenty this season. I could go right through the team and we could give that sort of analysis, couldn't we, about the majority of these players. But what it does mean, it means that we're pretty flexible. And I know we'll probably get onto the injury news and stuff. But when I heard the rumours about Nordy, I was like, well, it's all right. We've got Geertruida, we've got Dan Ballard, we're fine. we don't have to worry about these things anymore. We've got players who can play in those positions who are just as good or around that quality. And I think that from his perspective, and I think I said this the other week on here, from his perspective as a coach, that must be amazing. Like if you know you're a good coach and you just need the tools at your disposal to do your job and you're given them, that must give you so much freedom to be the best version of yourself. And Regis Lebris at Lorient, in his first season, achieved success, got 7th in the table, which for them was unbelievable. Then had all of his best players sold from beneath him and they got relegated. And it just shows you, doesn't it? If you give a good coach, a good manager the tools to do their job, they will do it. And that's what we're seeing from Regis at the minute. And that's why he's getting so much praise and he's been nominated, hasn't he, for Premier League Manager of the Month because he's done such a brilliant job so far.
Yeah, we'll come back onto that as well. But Bomber, Nick Barnes also asked, he was talking about the culture that was already at the club before the new signings arrived and saying that, that was already in place. And the manager turned around and said, that it was great that we weren't starting from scratch. And he actually gave a lot of credit to the players from last year, helping put those foundations in. But you can see the result of that when you see how quickly they've gelled into a team this season that basically they've just slotted into the kind of atmosphere and foundations that were already there.
Yeah, it was the biggest risk, wasn't it? Because there was such, particularly in how we ended up getting promoted. The semi-final, the final, how those played out, and it did build such a sense of camaraderie. So it would have been everybody's concern that having made such wholesale changes to the starting 11, brought so many signings in, let Job go, who was quite pivotal in terms of his character, and on the pitch, to be fair to him. The danger was upsetting that apple cart, because that was essentially that team spirit, that fight, that will to fight and battle for each other was what got us through those playoffs. There was a couple of moments of quality, but it was that never say die attitude and that camaraderie that got us there. So there was a danger, bringing in 8, 9, 10 new signings, 7, 8 of which are starting first game of the season. There is a danger that it puts a few too many noses out of joint, and actually you are starting again in terms of that culture, because everybody who helped you get there is all of a sudden not frozen out, but kind of put into the shade a little bit rather than let to bask in the Premier League sunlight. And if we didn't have such good characters there, then there would probably be a few problems coming up to now. 5, 6 games in, Dan Neil's not had much of a look in. Anthony Patterson's almost a forgotten man. If they weren't as good characters as they are, we could have had some problems. So it's really reassuring, and it's also praise to the coaching team and to the recruitment team and to Regis Lebris himself, that it's almost been seamless, that integration. You look at some of the lads who have been here, what are we now, October? They've been here 2 months at best, some of them, and they look like they've played a couple of seasons here already, and they've all gone out like on lads' holidays for the last 5 or 6 years, and they all grew up together. You see some of the social media stuff, and I know social media isn't always a true reflection of real life, but doesn't look like there's any acting or anyone pretending that they're fine in there. It looks like just as cohesive a unit as it was the back end of last season, albeit with new and arguably better players, higher quality players in there. So it's astounding how seamless it's been. It really is. And we're reaping the rewards of it now.
Yeah. And Gav, the manager was also asked, you're talking about the progress development and how people are gelling. He was asked if they were ahead of where he expected them to be. It was quite interesting because immediately he said, I like being surprised. But then he went on to say, it's positive at the moment, but it is fragile and we have new tests ahead. That sounded like a man who knows that everything's positive at the minute. It's fairly easy to manage. But he hinted there that he knows there's going to be some tough periods ahead this season.
It just goes back to what we talk about quite often with Regis Lebris. He doesn't get too high and he doesn't get too low. It's pointless asking him something like that because you're going to get that kind of reply. Even on some of our best days under his management, you wouldn't know it. He strikes that balance brilliantly. And for years, I always thought, that the best kind of character for Sunderland was a really passionate, straight talking manager in the traditional sense, like a Mick McCarthy, a Peter Reid,
And Allardyce, yeah.
Sam Allardyce. Yeah, I always thought that's a Sunderland manager. That's what you need. But actually, it's only when things are going well that those managers come across well. So, when you're winning games and you've got a manager who's beating his chest and Ange Postecoglou at Celtic won plenty of trophies. He was that kind of manager. Then you watch him after Forest get beaten Europe on Thursday night and he won't look up from the ground and he can't talk to the person who's interviewing him because he's on the floor emotionally. There's plenty of examples of that, right? Regis Lebris, whether we win, lose or draw, is always like that. So I actually think that we've kind of stumbled upon the right kind of manager for Sunderland in Regis Lebris. If everybody could be as level-headed as him, we'd be a lot better off. And as fans, we get really emotional about everything. Doesn't matter what it is. So the form we're in, I'm sitting here going, there's no reason why we can't get 6 points out the next 2 games. He won't be getting that carried away. He'll probably just be looking at the next game and going, well, we're going to go and try and win. But in the back of his mind, he's not writing off that a point would be a brilliant result. And even if we get beat, he'll pull positives from it and he'll be like, well, it is what it is. It's away from home. It's Man United. It's not going to define our season. We move on very quickly. And I actually think at a club where everything is so built on emotion that to have a figurehead like Regis Lebris who just doesn't get carried away ever, whether it's negatively or positively, is such an asset. And it's what makes, amongst many, many other things, is what makes him so good for us at the minute. And yeah, I actually, I wonder why they even bother asking him questions like that, because he's never going to go, oh yeah, it is going better than expected, isn't it? I didn't bloody see that coming, did I? You're not going to get that from him. He's just going to kind of shrug it off and go, yeah, well, whatever,
Yeah, there's a few questions I'll come on to that he seemed like he was ready for, but there was the conversation then turned to the team's self-belief, and again it was another interesting one, Bomber, because he straight away started smiling when he was asked this one, because he said straight away, he said that he'd actually talked with Granit Xhaka about this exact topic this week. And then he went on to say that the conversation he had with his captain, he said that they said that the squad is very balanced and ambitious, but they're very aware of their strengths and their weaknesses. I mean, for one, it's interesting to hear Xhaka's input off the pitch, which is a bit of a glimpse behind the scenes. But it's also reassuring to hear that they're not getting carried away and they're having these sort of conversations.
Yeah, it would be easy to do, wouldn't it? A newly promoted team, a load of players coming into a new team and a new challenge and a new league for a lot of them. Well, for most of them, actually. It would be easy to have the sort of start that we've had and then go, oh, actually, you know what, this Premier League isn't actually too bad. And then think they're going to, go and average 2 points a game for the rest of the season. And before you know it, we've not won in 10. And the stadium's 3/4 full again or half full. So it's nice to see that their feet are very firmly on the ground. I think Granit Xhaka is a massive part of that on and off the pitch, because I think he carries, in terms of, to our players at least, he is the most been there, done it kind of player, if you know what I'm saying. Like he's been captain of Arsenal, who were expected to win Premier League after Premier League and expected to go to Champions League finals. He's then gone to Leverkusen and done exactly the same with the pressure on him and been their captain and, been pivotal in an unbeaten season. So in terms of, like I say, been there, done that, he is the man. So for him to come in and have that sort of influence, he's probably been a lot more pivotal in balancing expectations and keeping people's feet on the ground than we think. You see after the games, you see like Mukiele dancing around and Diarra putting things on his Snapchat story where they're all dancing in the changing rooms, which is great because you want that positivity and you want that, but that can quite easily slip into complacency. So it seems to me that between Xhaka and Lebris, I think they've got a very tight relationship, and they probably bounce off each other ideas and theories and what's the word? I can't think of it, but ideas off of one another, philosophies. That's what the word I was thinking of. And he is kind of Lebris on the pitch. He's the person who's calming everybody down, and even probably in training. Xhaka's probably the first person in training, meeting everybody, and the first chat that they have on a Monday morning or a Tuesday morning at training is, that was brilliant, but we go again. Let's not get carried away, and just keeping everybody's feet on the ground. And you just hear when Xhaka speaks after the games and in any of the press conferences or any of the promotional stuff he does for us and our social media, you can just tell that he is, the player version of Lebris. He doesn't get too high, he doesn't get too low. He's very realistic in his expectations, and I think he's doing a brilliant job of managing the rest of the players so that they don't get carried away.
Yeah, you need to be careful as well, Bomber. You'll have the ukulele police on your back as well, so you just need to be aware of that. But one thing we haven't actually talked about, because another thing that happened this week, Gavin, was that, and the manager was quizzed on it, was about the appointment of new performance coaches and nutritionists who've been appointed over the last week. And he straight away, he just kind of shrugged his shoulders and he went, yep, we always have to keep upgrading. And he talked about this being a long journey. And the interesting end to this answer was that he actually said, to be clear, the journey doesn't finish. Meaning, there's always somewhere or something we can improve in. But it's another glimpse into how the club are refusing to stand still, even though we're in a good moment, because, that it's very easy to say, well, we've cracked it. We are where we are, top end of the Premier League. But no, while we're in a good position, we're still strengthening.
Yeah, I did find the timing of that curious, because some of those staff members have been pictured in training videos and photos since the summer started. So the club have purposely held off announcing some of those appointments, which you would imagine is just to feed into the feel good, isn't it? Because ultimately, at the minute, everything's going right. You want everybody to be fed good news, and the transfer window's out the way now, so it's not like we're being battered over the head with that. So, yeah, not a bad time to announce it. I can't remember any of the names of the people, but it's the guy who worked for Dortmund, and I think he was the US national team or New York Red Bulls or something. Anyways, apparently he worked with Xhaka at Arsenal, so you wonder how much influence he's maybe had on that appointment, and said, actually, this guy's not working at the minute. I've worked with him before, he's outstanding, blah, blah, blah. So again, it feeds into that thing about Xhaka's influence at the club, doesn't it? Potentially. But yeah, just interesting to me that the club decided this week to announce all of that. But still, good news, When you get into the Premier League, your budgets are bigger, your departments need to expand. We haven't stood still. We haven't done what a lot of clubs do when they get promoted and just try and get by. We went, no, this is an opportunity. We've now got the money to do it. Let's become a proper outfit. And when you're recruiting players like Granit Xhaka, they expect a certain standard within the club. You hear stories, I remember, to a lesser degree, of course, but I remember Troy Deeney on a podcast or maybe on TalkSport talking about when he signed for Birmingham, who were his club as a kid. And he signed for Birmingham at the tail end of his career, and he goes in and the lads are all bringing packed lunches in and washing their own kits, and the training ground's dropping to bits, and the players, he got like a group of players together to clean the place up just because it was a dump. And everything was dropping to bits and shitty and old. Players who've been used to a certain standard want to move into an environment that's just as good, if not better, than what they've been used to, because that automatically lifts the mood, gives an impression that Sunderland are a proper football club. So yeah, all of that investment's been really important.
Yeah. And Gav's already mentioned it, Bomber, but the subject of the award nominations came up, and of course there's the manager up for an award, and Roofs and Xhaka as well. He was always going to play this down a bit, but he did say that it's a pleasure to get the nominations. And of course he finished by saying everyone is playing their role, which is kind of brushing it off, because Gav's kind of touched on it already a little bit, but I'm really not sure that he's the type of fella who's bothered about these type of awards.
No, I was just about to that was the first thing I was going to do to answer your question, is I don't think he really cares. I think he'll take satisfaction at the end of the season and we're sat 17th or higher, and then he'll feel that it's job done. And let's be honest, if we carry on what we're doing and we finish in some sort of mid-table or top half table finish, he's going to be manager of the season for all intents and purposes. He's going to be nominated for it, certainly. And I'm sure he'd much rather that award than win a manager of the month award in September, and then we end up falling to pieces and getting relegated. So yeah, I don't think he's bothered. I think he'll probably think it's nice to be recognised, or that for our achievements so far to be recognised. But no, I don't think.
Do you prefer that, Bomber? Because I know there's some managers who get all the squads out and the tea ladies and the everybody out for the picture with the award and makes a massive thing of it. I mean, what would you prefer? Would you prefer someone to kind of boost the profile and do a dance about it? And
not really, Chris, because it just plays into what we were saying earlier about breeding complacency. You don't get extra points for winning a Manager of the Month award. You don't get extra points in the table for winning a Player of the Month award. The only thing that really matters is what that league table looks like come May, and it's all right. Somebody could win a Player of the Month award, a Manager of the Month award, be absolutely drastic for the rest of the season, and it's not worth the metal it's cast in. Or are they metal anymore? Anyway, yeah.
Used to be a bottle of champagne, didn't it?
And I think he's probably the character that he won't care. He'll take private pride in having been nominated, but Lebris, again, he's not one to take praise when it's thrown at him. He'll try and deflect it onto the players and onto the coaching staff and everything else. So even if he wins this Manager of the Month award, I don't think he'll wholly accept it and kind of keep it for himself. He'll say, well, it's not really me, it's the players, it's the coaching staff, but it's nice to be recognised. I don't think it's anything more than that for him. And it's nice to see two of the 6 players that are nominated for Player of the Month as well, be Sunderland players, which I couldn't tell you the last time that probably happened in the Premier League. Maybe Darren Bent, possibly.
I'm just getting flashbacks now. Pictures of photographs of Peter Reid with gigantic bottles of champagne with Carlin on it, on the label. I hope it wasn't massive bottles of Carlin. That's really the last thing you want. But just on those awards, Gav, because he was asked about the potential of Robin Roofs, and he just went, we don't know. But he said, what we do know is that he's starting from a really high standard. And the other thing he talked about, which I think is always interesting in a goalkeeper, Gav, I don't know where you sit on this. He said he's got a very balanced temperament. And when you look at goalkeepers, they always seem to sit at two extremes, don't they? They're either really, really calm, or you've got your Robin Roofs, let's say, or your David Seamans maybe. And then on the other end, you've got your Jordan Pickfords, Bruce Grobbelaars and all of that. But I prefer my goalkeeper. I remember Thomas Sorensen being quite calm as well. I prefer my goalkeepers to be in that camp, but I don't know where you sit on it.
I think, to be honest, Roofs has got the best balance I've seen of a goalkeeper in a long time in that regard. He's not a shrinking violet. He's gobs open all the time. He's always pointing and shouting, but he's not erratic with it, which I think Pickford can be to a certain extent. I think I mean, I can't say anything other than loads of positives about Robin Roofs. What can you say about him? I've yet to see any flaw in his game. Any at all. And I know people will point to that goal that Aston Villa scored, but I actually think he was a bit unfortunate with that. And it certainly didn't highlight any issues in his game with that goal. So yeah, I don't want to rant or and raver, but I like someone who's still not scared to dig the defenders out or maybe tell them they need to be doing something. And I noticed that even in the West Ham game. It was one of the first things I noticed when I watched Match of the Day that night, was what I think within the first minute or two of the highlights of the game, they were showing Roofs screaming at the defenders. I was like, he's been there 2 minutes. I don't think he'd even played a pre-season game, had he?
Yeah. Rings a bell.
Yeah, so he barely knew these lads, but he was like straight in there. This is my job, and my job's to give direction to the defence.
Yeah. He's got the perfect balance between Jordan Pickford and Anthony Patterson, isn't he, in terms of temperament?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's definitely a lot of middle ground there, to be fair.
Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah,
but just quickly, Gav, on that goal you mentioned, the Aston Villa goal. I think with some goalkeepers, depending on how they're playing, you don't know how the fans are going to react to a goal like that, Gav. But then I think because of his performances, it's almost like he had so much credit in the bank, and people know that we're comfortable with him being in goal. And he's now getting popular just purely because of his performances. That actually, it was like people are kind of saying, yeah, because he was the most disappointed in the stadium with letting that goal in. But I think it was a case of, he'll be all right, don't worry about him. Even though some people might have thought it might have been a mistake, people just went, yeah, he's fine. He might make one, but we're still comfortable.
They had a lot of change in the bank off the back of the performances to that point. That was what that is. If Robin Roofs goes on to have 3 or 4 howlers, then the perception of him will change drastically. But up until that point, he'd been probably our most outstanding player, I would say. We've had a lot of good performers already this season, but Roof's in every single game. And even in that Villa game, actually, if you take the goal out of it, which again, I don't really blame him for. I think it was a difficult one. I think he had a great game. He had that moment, didn't he, where was it Gesund? Ball was played across to him in the box, and he, rather than go to ground, he just stood it up and saved it. And then there was an offside. It kind of deflected into the path of Watkins, I think, or Rodgers, I can't remember. And he saved that too. And so, and right through that game, he'd had a good game. So even on his worst day to date, he was still brilliant. So it is what it is, isn't it?
Yeah. I think it was Martin who said in the first 4 games where we got points, he made brilliant saves against Jared Bourne at West Ham, saved the penalty at Brentford, brilliant at Palace, and as you said, made saves against Villa. So he's been key to us getting points in all of those games. Right, on to some team news from the press conference. Nick Barnes was, he asked the manager about the rumours on social media about the fitness of Michele, and a big grin came over his face like a person who'd heard the term social media for the very first time. And he just replied, "No, he's okay." And that was it. Nick Barnes didn't really know where to go after that. I think he was expecting a bit of a longer answer. But Gav said he might have been comfortable. We've got players to come in, and we have. But God, he's been so important in that partnership with Alderete. I mean, it would have been, although we've got players to come in, it would have been a little bit, and people were talking about putting Ballard in and going 5 at the back and all this, and Ballard's in form. But there would have still been that element of, oh, God, he's so important. It's still a bit of a blow.
Yeah, it would have been. That partnership with Alderete is how it looks like they've been playing together for years and years. It's amazing how quickly they have come to know each other's games and complement each other really well. I still don't think it would have been the end of the world because, whilst I don't necessarily prescribe to Dan Ballard's own form, he had a very good and excellent, 60 minutes or however long it was. That doesn't translate into good form, but he's just carried on from last season, and he was that good last season at the back end. And there were probably questions as whether he could make the step up to the Premier League. I think he's gone some way to answer those. So I'd be quite comfortable if Ballard did come in. I don't think we should be tinkering around with formations and going 5 at the back, etc. But if the players who are doing so well and have got us to 5th place are fit, available, ready, raring to go, why would you change it? Even if there's even a slight knock with Mukiele and he wants to play, just play him, because if he does break down and he's out for a couple of weeks, there is Dan Ballard to come in. There are other options that we have. But I don't think we're in a position now where we need to be wrapping players in cotton wool like we were probably the back end of last season, where options were a little bit thin on the ground because we had a few longer term injuries. If players are self-declaring themselves fit and ready to go, then and they're doing well and we're winning and we're performing well, just leave them in. Sometimes that decision might be needed to take out their hands, but judging by Lebrise's reaction, it seems like social media once again, surprise, surprise, has made a storm in a teacup. And Mukiele has gone from career-threatening injury, and he's going to be out forever, and he's certainly not going to be fit for the Man United game, to just a little wry grin from the manager to go, no, he's fine. And we'll probably see him. Judging by that, I'm assuming we'll see him in the starting lineup at Old Trafford.
The other thing with injuries as well, by the way, when you're doing well, those little niggles, people play through them. They want to play. Yeah. I've heard that quite a bit from ex-players and managers, where they'll say when things are going well, everyone wants to play, everyone wants to be involved. Those injuries that might keep you out if you're not doing so well, they maybe don't exist, or they're not affecting you quite as much when you're in a good winning team. So there is that too. I'm not saying Mukiele hasn't got enough. I imagine that the majority of the team are nursing some sort of problem, because you always are, people with bruised toes and sore ribs and a bad back and a bad shoulder. But if we're doing well, everyone is going to want to play. So it doesn't really matter, you just get on with it.
I think the other thing as well is that obviously we're not going Saturday, Tuesday, Sunday, Wednesday anymore. So those knocks that, if somebody picked up on a Saturday might rule them out of a Tuesday night, doesn't really affect the team or the squad as much anymore because, okay, you don't train Tuesday, you don't train Monday, Tuesday, do some light training Wednesday, and before you know it, you're playing on a lunchtime on a Sunday, so you've got extra time to recover, and what would have been 90% you and possibly ruled you out is now a 99% you, and you're straight back in. So I think that plays into it as well.
Yeah. And Gav, the manager was asked about milestones, but then he started to slip into talking about us, how we set up and kind of our ethos, because he said, talked about milestones, about conceding goals, how many points we've got, fast starts and all that. But he said, obviously he began by saying that points are the most important thing. But then he said it starts with our identity. We want to defend as a unit. We want to suffer together. And then he said that's a key point for our squad. But then he said after that, you can express yourself. And I thought that was a really good insight to the foundations that they've put in place to start with, in terms of how they've set us up in the early part of this season.
Yeah, definitely. I think I might have said this last week, but we've built a team which I think first and foremost understands the power of hard work. And there are no real individuals in this squad, which is a good thing because it means that they all understand the power of working as a team. It's no surprise that we score so many late goals because this team understands that sometimes for 45 minutes, particularly away from home, it's going to be pretty crap. You're going to sit back, you're going to dig in, we're going to work them out. If we get chances, we'll try and take them as we did at Palace. As we did at Forest. But otherwise, just be prepared to muck in. And it's not like when you sometimes hear stories, don't you, about like clubs really who don't have much of an identity. Forest are probably a good example of this, actually, because they've went from having a manager who is a bit like Lebris in many ways in the way he sets his team up and he wants them to play. And the players have almost went from having one approach to a completely different one. And this new manager's come and try to change everything so quickly. And the players don't really understand and they're not really on board with it. It's not what they signed up to. Do you know what I mean? Whereas with our lot, they know exactly what they signed up to because we know how detailed we are. We're not just going out and going, the mate of the manager going, I've got a player here, he's a good lad, he's had problems with injuries, but if you can get, hell of a player on his day, this, that, like he used to be back in the day in Reedy's years and going even further back. It's not like that. We've specifically recruited players for this style of football. So nobody's under any illusions. We haven't got players coming in and going, but they're asked us to run a bit further than I thought. I'd rather be in a team that wants to be on the ball. They all understand it. So, and again, it's all just preparation for everything, down to the granular level of like when you're recruiting a footballer and you're sitting around a table with them and the representatives and you're going, this is the way we play. This is where we see you in our team, blah, 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 blah. And it all comes down to that Saturday, the game when you go out on the pitch. They all understand. They all know what their job is. They all understand what the purpose is. And I think as we saw last season and as we've seen this season with basically a completely different team, that's just the way he likes it to be. And it works. You can't argue with the method.
Yeah. And I think that's a good place for us to have a quick break, and we'll be back after these few ads.
Wish you could become a morning person? You know the type, up before the sun, early morning runs, first one to the office with donuts and a smile. How do they do it? Easy. With the new Galaxy Watch 8, sleep tracking and personalized insights from Samsung Health help you improve so you can wake up to a whole new you. One who, dare I say it, skips the snooze? It's possible. Train your sleep with Galaxy Watch 8. Learn more at Samsung.com. Requires compatible Samsung Galaxy phone, Samsung Health app, and Samsung account.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samra Origins by the Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samra Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samra. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold, soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samra Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
Big news. Sephora is now on Uber Eats. So if you find yourself facing a beauty emergency, like needing a last-minute gift, or you're just out of your favorite mascara, again, don't panic. We got you. Order now and get $10 off on Sephora orders of $50 or more on the Uber Eats app. Order now. Offer ends October 30th. One order per customer. Additional terms apply. See app for availability. Delivery fees may apply.
And welcome back to Howie the podcast. And we're getting into potentially looking at how Labree's looking at setting up and things we might have to improve, Bomber, because the comments that we were talking about there, what Gav was talking about, those foundations, he also finished those by saying we can definitely improve going forward. And then he said, because if we don't concede, we are still alive and we can build confidence and patterns of play. So it's reassuring to know, because we've, in every game, we've been going brilliant effort, fantastic defending, brilliant kind of structure we've got there. And although the focus is on being tight, it is reassuring to know that they're working on improving at the other end.
Yeah, it is. You know, it'd be easy for a team to come up from the Championship to the Premier League and just think, right, we need to tighten up our defence, we need to concede goals, and think that that will probably be enough to keep them up, when in reality it's not. Because such is the quality of the Premier League, you can defend for 89 minutes gallantly and you know, be the pride of your fans, but things can turn in 15 seconds in the Premier League, and all of a sudden what would have been a gritty 0-0 draw is a 1-0 defeat. And then too many of those, and then people start asking questions and you start kind of doubting yourself. And it has been in some of the games. I know it's still very early doors, but in some of the games we have, I don't want to be critical, but we have looked a little bit blunt going forward, or a little bit kind of reserved going forward, and almost like not considering the quality we've got. It seems that we should be carving out more opportunities than maybe we have done in some of the games. And I say that's probably a very harsh criticism considering where we are, but we are, you know, it's a 0-0 against Palace, it's a 1-1 Villa, it's a 1-0 win at Forest. So that, you know, we are scoring, but I don't think at the moment it's going to be it's enough to maintain the momentum that we've got, because there will be times, you know, we'll go to teams that the likes of Brighton. I'm not saying like the Man Cities and the Arsenals and the likes, because you go to those places not really expecting anything and knowing that you're going to pretty much defend for your lives and hope to come away with a 1-0 or a 1-1. But some of those other teams that are kind of top end teams that, you know, you would go, certainly at the moment, go and fancy your chances against, you need to make sure that you're creating those opportunities, or you're set up in a way that you can stop at one end and you can score at the other. Otherwise, we'll just end up with a load of away 0-0 draws, which in some respects wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. But you know, we do need to pick up away wins, or certainly more away wins, and just look that little bit more threatening, because otherwise we become really quite easy to play against. And you know, one thing that has always been, or not always, but certainly in recent times been an issue for us, is when teams aren't as expansive and kind of sit in a little bit. We've always been a little bit blunt and a little bit short of ideas. And I know we've got new players and we've got better players, but we're up against better players. So the principles are still the same. So yeah, to kind of come back round and answer your question, it is nice to see that there are still very visible signs of where we can improve, and the coaching staff, and most importantly, the man just sees that, and he's not going, do you know what? Yeah, we're sat fifth at the minute. Everything's great. You know, nothing. It couldn't be better. Which other managers would have done. Other managers of other teams would sit there and go, yeah, it's brilliant. Like we're doing really well at the minute. Again, it's refreshing to see that probably the players, but certainly the coaching staff, aren't satisfied with where we're at. They want to keep going. They want to improve. Because at the moment we're still an unknown quantity. Like, people don't necessarily know who we are, how we play. That will change very, very quickly. The more success we have as the season progresses. So we need to find other ways and new ways of breaking teams down and winning games and picking up points, because the other teams will have more and more tape on us and be more efficient at stopping us. So yeah, it's really good to see. It's definitely a positive thing.
Yeah, and just on that, Gav, because we talked about this before the Forest game, where we thought the goals were coming from, and actually we ended up kind of maybe calling out that Alderete might stick one in, I think, before the Forest game. And actually the question was raised about defenders and midfielders chipping in with goals. And again, there was a little bit of insight because he said, yes, they should chip in, and especially on set pieces. And he went on to say, and I think Bomber touched on it, because it is the Premier League and it's so difficult to break sides down. And he mentioned that our other kind of option or our other best chance was really on the in transition, which was the best route otherwise. But he said set pieces for promoted sides especially were crucial for us to be competitive. And we knew we looked better at them this season, it's obvious. But it's clearly something the coach and staff have identified from the top. And now it's become almost our best opportunity to score. And, you know, as soon as we get a free kick, even if it's midway inside our own half, it's almost kind of you're already on the edge of your seat now, aren't you?
That's it. And it's because, again, just to come back to an earlier point, it's because we've recruited the personnel to be able to do these things. Granit Xhaka's dead ball deliveries are top level. So why wouldn't you weaponize that? Why wouldn't you weaponize the fact that you've got really aggressive physical players in your team that can attack the ball? Why wouldn't you weaponize having a moldable squad of players who listen in training and who respond well to ideas? You know, that these are all things that, again, I keep repeating, little advantages Sunderland can have over teams who might have, on paper, more talent than us. We can be more physical. We can be more creative when it comes to set players. We can outthink them, outwork them. It's almost like a game of chess, isn't it, to a degree? Like we might not have, you look at the Man U team that's probably going to take us on, and you see some of the individuals that they've got, and we know one more than anybody in Amad Diallo, right? He's expected to be back for this game, so somebody like Amad in their team. I know he's not everybody's cup of tea, but Bruno Fernandes he's a world class player. Brian Mbeumo, as Justin Moorhouse said to you, has been brilliant for them so far. And you go right through that team and you see the quality they've got individually. But if they're not up for it, then we're going to get advantages in terms of physicality, in terms of being more of a threat on set players. You can totally see why we've done it. It's great as well, though, because I couldn't tell you the last time that Sunderland did that. Have we ever done that, really? Now, even going back in the day, I don't think the coaching was of this level back in the day when teams were more, when we had Quinny up front, it was just, fire up the big man, he's going to win the ball. It's not that straightforward. There's actually a lot of thinking behind what we're doing. I'm not even sure we've ever had this before with set players. There've been moments. I remember when I think when Lee Johnson was manager, he had an assistant who was doing something similar, and we did have a few games where the set players were good, but it wasn't like over a sustained period. And I remember I think it was under Alex Neil as well, where we had a few set piece goals, but there's never been like something where you sit back and you go, actually, this is really detailed and there's purpose behind it. And the other thing about that is as well, it's not like going front to back on a football pitch and patterns being easy to replicate. Like, Manuel had done their analysis of Sunderland and they'll have seen the way we defend, the way that we press and all these things. You can't do that with set players because everyone is unique, really. Corners maybe less so because corners are taken from virtually the same place. But if we get a free kick anywhere around the edge of the box, depending on where it is and who's on the pitch at the time, our way of attacking those set plays is going to be very different each time, and they can't plan for that. They just can't. So it's actually more baffling to me why more teams don't do it. But at the minute, somebody's going to take notice of Sunderland at some point and start copying us, I'm sure. I actually think those Mukiele long throw-ins that we saw against West Ham, all of a sudden in the next couple of weeks afterwards, you saw teams doing the same thing. And I just wonder, that's what happens in the Premier League. Other coaches will look at what other teams are doing. But for the minute, I'm just over the moon. It's just that's weaponizing set players.
Yeah, I'm just glad we found that player who's got a long throw this time rather than find out later he has a long throw. But just moving on to Manchester United, Bomber, because there was a cheeky question thrown at the manager about Amram playing the same formation and not changing things. And he saw it coming a mile off. He wasn't having any of that. He turned it back on himself, just saying, well, I'm going to say what I think. But he did say that he felt consistency was a good thing. And he gave the examples of Masuaku and Chris Rigg coming in last time because they knew the exact role that they had to play in the side. But do you think people are making a big thing of the fact Amran isn't changing his formation? Because I put this to Justin Moorhouse when we got onto this topic, that you can play any formation, but it doesn't matter whether you're playing 2 at the back, 5 at the back, 6 at the back. You can't legislate for Maguire trying to play offside on the halfway line and stepping out and not catching him offside and letting him play a goal 20 yards through on goal without anybody near him. So, I mean, do we make too much of a big thing about the formation with Manchester United?
I think we do. And if we're being honest, if, for all criticism Amorim had last season, if he brought players in and they'd started the season, 4 wins and 2 draws out of 6, no one would be talking about the formation. And in fact, it'd be quite the opposite and be going, oh, finally, he's got his players in. And then look, this formation works. He's a specialist in the 3-5-2 or in the wing backs. And as we know, football matches are unpredictable. Like you said, just a single moment from Maguire that leads to a chance or to a goal doesn't make the formation a bad one. You could be playing 4 at the back, like you said, you could be playing 2 at the back. If he makes that decision and gets that wrong, it's going to lead to a chance or to a goal, and that's nothing down to the formation. You could counter argue that with say, okay, well, having conceded, is the formation sufficient? Is he doing enough to go down the other end and get something from the game? But again, I don't think that's necessary formation. Man United have got good enough players. They're just not particularly gelling or playing well at the minute. And I don't think that's necessarily down to the formation. Formations, strategies, they only come under criticism when things aren't working so well. And they're at the moment, certainly, they're not really working that well for Man United. But I'm looking through some of their results and stuff, and it's not as bad as it's certainly below expectations of what Manchester United should be. The history and the tradition of Manchester United is to be up there, but I don't think it's necessarily as bad as last season or the season before. They've not had that bad results really. They've took a bit of a humping off of Man City, obviously, but they're still picking up points. They still beat Chelsea at Old Trafford. They admittedly kind of scraped past Burnley a little bit, and they probably don't want to talk about the EFL Cup exit to Grimsby. But Arsenal, they lost 1-0 at Arsenal. Sorry, it wasn't at Arsenal. It was at Old Trafford. So it's very much a mixed bag. I don't necessarily see it as doom and gloom, and I don't necessarily prescribe to the notion that Man United it's going to be a lot easier a Manchester United team to play against than what we've probably previously played against. I think it's going to be a lot harder than we think. And I don't think Manchester United's season has been quite as bad as the press and some of the fans are making out. Like I say, they've played Arsenal, they've played Man City, they've played Chelsea. They've lost 2 of those, and they've beaten Chelsea. The Brentford result will hurt, but yeah,
I'm not sure I agree with that. When you look at those results, they've just been battered off Brentford 3-1, and Brentford we beat them. They're all right, but
we're the fifth best team in the country.
and the lost comfortably to Man City. I don't know if you watched that game, but
I did. Yeah, they got battered by City. Yeah,
very, very close win over Burnley. I mean, they scored a penalty in the 97th minute to win that game, and they conceded twice to Burnley.
And remember, they played a whole half with a player more against Chelsea, where they actually went 2-0 up before Casemiro leveled things up.
And that cup game you mentioned against Grimsby, I mean, going out to Grimsby in the cup is embarrassing for Man U. But then when you look at the team the Man United fielded, Šeško, Cunha, Ahmad, Dorgu, Ugarte, Manu, Dalot, Harry Maguire, Onana played in that game. Off the bench, they had De Ligt, Mount, Fernandes, Zirkzee, Mbeumo against Grimsby, and they got knocked out. That's why when people look at Man United, they go, there's something not right here.
You're right, Gav. You are right. I just think that there's a different it is a different Man United playing them at Old Trafford than at home. If you compare and contrast the home form with the away form, I'm just looking at it now. So, all right, a 1-0 loss to Arsenal at Old Trafford, fair enough. Scraped through, but albeit beat Burnley, and then beaten Chelsea. It's the away form. They shipped 3 at the Etihad. They shipped 3 at Brentford. They drew with Fulham, and obviously lost to Grimsby. I think if this was at Old Trafford, it is at Old Trafford. If this was at the Stadium of Light, I'd be leaning towards us winning the match. I just think it's not at Old Trafford. There's still something about Manchester United at Old Trafford that helps them get the job done. And I guess you could make that argument for any team that's playing at home.
There is, but when you look at so they've picked up 6 points at home this season. Burnley and they beat Chelsea. Chelsea had the goalkeeper sent off after 4 minutes, and they scraped.
Yeah, that's fair.
And then, like I said, that Burnley game, it was the 97th minute. So yes, they got the point, and ultimately all that matters is the point. But I don't think that's reflective of them being a strong home team. I actually think it's probably more reflective of them being quite a nervous home team. And
possibly that's probably because of the fans. But don't forget, Casemiro got sent off basically in half time in that match.
Yeah,
so.
But I mean, when you look at Chelsea bloody took all their attacking players off.
They went 2-0 up when they were a player up.
Yeah, that's fair.
And then when it was levelled up, it was all Chelsea in that second half.
Yeah,
and Chelsea took every attacking player off to deal with it,
Just based on what Bomber said, Gav, can I put a question to you? That Bomber started touching on the fact it's Manchester United, and I was talking about this again on the preview pod with Justin Moorhouse, that they've got this aura about them. But if you look at their players, does the fact that some of the likes of, you look at how Luke Shaw's playing, look how Maguire's playing, even Fernandes to a certain extent, you look at the other players around them as well, that do we elevate them because they're playing for Manchester United? Are they just mid-table players, but because they're at Manchester United, we're thinking, well, they must be better than that?
Well, in midweek, I don't know if you saw Napoli, but Rasmus Højlund, who Man United couldn't get a tune out of, all of a sudden looks like Erling Haaland. He's banging them in. There's something about Man United. Scott McTominay, Serie A Player of the Year last year, couldn't get off their bench, and he's the best player in Italy. And it's not that the standard in Italy is worse than the standard in the Premier League necessarily. It's that club. There is something wrong fundamentally with that football club. And I agree with what Bomber says about it. It is Man U. It's at Old Trafford. There is a certain allure about this game. There's no denying it. But our players can't go there and be overawed. They've got to go there and get very quickly, when they'll have that hour before the game where they're all walking around the pitch with their AirPods on and they're looking about and they go, yeah. Right, take it in then. There you go. You've took it in. It's Man United. It's Old Trafford. Brilliant. Now get your head down and realise that 11v11, this is not a team that's better than you, because they just aren't. Right now, they are not better than us. Individually, perhaps, you look through that squad and you go, yeah, the amount of money they've spent on those players, obscene, really. They should be walking the floor with Sunderland. And I think that's part of the frustration that Man United fans have when they look at the quality of football of the recruit. It doesn't equate to results on the pitch, and they're wondering why. But that's not Sunderland's concern. Sunderland's concern should be pick your battles around the pitch. Physically, we'll out-battle them. We've got to make that count in this game. And I couldn't give a shit that it's Man United. I really couldn't. Could not give a shiny shite that it's Man United. At the end of the day, our players, I know because I've seen them 6 times a season, have got what it takes to beat them. And that's got to be the belief. They've got to go into the game thinking it doesn't matter that this is Man U. Who gives a shit what they did 12 years ago under Alex Ferguson? Makes absolutely no difference to today.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I'm not suggesting that that our players will go to Old Trafford and think, oh, bloody hell, we're going to Old Trafford here, and be overawed by it.
They might though, Bomber, though, that it is a point, because a lot of these players will have grown up like we did with watching Man U, and just they won't have even been near that ground, and they will be looking at it and going, oh, God, I'm playing at Old Trafford, because that is the effect it has on you. But as we saw at Wembley, because Wembley's the same, right? Oh, I'm playing at Wembley. But the occasion didn't overawe us, and I just think that's important. Like, it doesn't count for that much when it comes down to it.
I think you're forgetting that most of our team are too young to have seen the Alex Ferguson side properly, actually. But Bummer, you mentioned something earlier on that, I can't remember if it was you or Gav now, but I'll put it to you, Bummer, about the pressure on Man United to win. Now Sunderland are coming to town, promoted through the playoffs. All right, we might be quite high in the league. Fair enough. Still Sunderland who've come up through the playoffs. And there's going to be 70,000 people rocking up to Old Trafford expecting Manchester United to win. And there's a case that if Ruben Amorim can't beat Sunderland at Old Trafford, I mean, then it's kind of, well, where do you go from here? So the pressure on them to go and beat us on Saturday is huge. I mean, it's almost a free hit for us in some ways, isn't it?
Yeah, and that genuinely, I think, will be the key to us getting something from the game. It will be, because regardless of how they're playing, Manchester United, Old Trafford will be sold out. It will be full of the diehards who are disgruntled and have watched, crap or promise after promise, but still being dealt crap. I have very little sympathy for them because they should try being a Sunderland fan and watching some of the crap that we've had in the last.
Actually, the other day for the preview and stuff, I listed all the cups they won since Ferguson left. I was like, oh yeah, that looks like a disaster. That,
yeah,
the Europa League.
I wish we were that rubbish.
FA Cups, League Cups. I was like, yeah, disaster. That, isn't it?
Yeah, but there's make no mistake. So Manchester United fans aren't happy with the way things are going. Amorim's getting hounded every day on TalkSport and the likes about him not being up to the job, etc., etc. And I think that's what we need to utilise. If we go that first half, nullifying United, 0-0, 1-0 up at half time, maybe even before that. Maybe let's say we score, God forbid we should score in the first half of a game. But let's say we
did that last time out.
Oh, we did, yeah. But let's say we go 1-0 up. Those 70,000 Manchester United fans are going to be absolutely vile towards their players, their team, everything else, and that's where we would capitalise. I think if we go 1-0 down early doors, I think it will be very, very difficult for us. But the key for me to getting something from this game is going to be getting the crowd to turn against their own players again.
Right. Well, we'll go into Sunderland's starting 11, Gav. Can you see any changes from the one that took on Forest?
Ooh, that's a tough one. That I haven't even thought about this, but probably not. No.
Well, maybe for doing a preview, I might have thought it crossed your mind to be.
Are you not? Nah. I can't. Who would come out?
All the questions I might ask,
I just think the patterns in both games are going to be pretty similar from our perspective, in terms of you're away from home, you're playing a team who are going to probably dominate the ball, regardless of what way they're set up. So I can't imagine there will possibly a change in terms of Rig. I do think with Rig, because of his age, they're going to be keen to give him opportunities, yes, but he won't play every single game. And it's important to note that Man United generally play with a 2 in midfield with a 10 floating, which leaves them outnumbered. And that might come into the thinking when it comes to who do we put in there. I could see a world in which Geertruida comes into the midfield. I'm not even considering Daniel, because I just think the fact he hasn't started either of the last 2 games says a lot about where they see him. And it was interesting to note in Reggie Slabrese's press conference when he was asked about Geertruida that he, in the past, he's talked about seeing him as a centre-half, and this one he was talking about seeing him as a versatile player, and he mentioned midfield first, so that's playing on my mind a little bit. But yeah, look, if he doesn't change things, I'm not bothered. I think I'm pretty happy with the team who started against Forest. I think we were well versed in how he likes to do things. He will set up with a pretty solid, organised base. Depending on how the game goes, he then makes adjustments, and that might be more defensive ones or more attacking ones, depending on what we need in the game. That means that team that played against Forest is probably his best bet. But there's a part of us that's really keen to see Geertruida start a game, and that doesn't have to be in defence. I think if he thinks he can play in midfield, he will, and maybe push Siddiqui up a little bit and have Geertruida along. Because I don't know if you watched, there was a really good video. The Premier League actually put it out, and I watched it yesterday. Just analysing our tactics and basically talking about what we do that's different and why we're succeeding. And it was noted, and I don't know why, but I hadn't really noticed this, but it was noted we've gone from playing with basically 2 8s like we did in the Championship to now playing with 2 sitting midfield players. And that, I guess, opens up an opportunity, doesn't it? I mean, Siddiqui can be freed up. I think Siddiqui could do that sort of more advanced midfield role because he's just everywhere, isn't he? Where you can put someone a little bit more solid in alongside Xhaka and make those numbers count in midfield. So they might have quality players. Casemiro's not what he was, but he's still got some level of ability. Bruno Fernandes is their best player. If we can out-battle them like we did against Villa in the midfield, because I thought that was the glaring thing with Aston Villa, that they just didn't have the physicality to cope with us. If we can do something similar in this game, I think that could be where we get the advantage. And so if I was thinking of anything, it'll be midfield. But actually, now I'm saying that out loud, Chris, you could just put Lefay in the 10 position and you could play Dingra wide, and I wouldn't be adverse to that. Or even Talby on the left and somebody else on the right-hand side, maybe. We've got options. I just don't think at this stage he's going to be keen to tinker too much. I don't think there's a need to either. We've had a full week, haven't we? So
yeah. I'm just relieved you had a good think about it, Gav. That's all. Bomber, I mean, for you, Gav mentioned a lot of options, and we do this every week now because we've got so many great players in the squad. There's just
options is becoming our buzzword.
Yeah,
people were playing Howie the Podcast Bingo. Options would be on there.
Welcome to the Options Podcast. But Bomber, I mean, you wonder did Masuaku do enough at fullback to just say, yep, you keep your place there? Gav mentioned Chris Rigg is potentially the other one, and there's the whole conversation about getting at Manchester United in the middle of the park, which might come into the manager's thinking. There's also, that question of Lefay on the left. Is that not, pulling them inside? Isidore as well he's working his socks off up front. Has he made that striker position his own? That's a question that'll come into the thinking of for the starting 11. Is there any changes you can see? I mean, I think Gav's overall summary was that he thinks the manager will keep the same as starting 11 after all that, but I think there'll be any changes?
No, I don't know. That's the point. I just don't know.
But I think the manager he talked a lot in the press conference about consistency in the side though. And it would be a big call, Bomber, if he did pull anyone out after that performance at Forest.
Yeah, it would. And I'll give some begrudging kudos to Gav, because unlike him, I did think about what the team changes might be, and I actually have come up with the same conclusion that he did, which is really quite frustrating that he's just done that on there. So I mean, just to reiterate or regurgitate what Gav was saying, essentially, I think the one person who might come out is Rigg, and there's 2 options there. You push Lefay inside and you give Adingra a place back in the starting 11, or you put Gertruida in there, and you have 3 kind of very mobile, very physical, and really quite clever, cute players in that midfield, and you try and out-battle, you try and outwork Ugarte, Mainu, Casemiro, whoever they put in those midfield positions.
Just on that, Bomber, I'd actually be disappointed if he put Mainu in there.
Yeah, probably would, because he's the one that kind of gets about and has actually got that energy. I think if Casemiro and Ugarte starts, I would fancy. I know obviously they normally would play somebody in the hole that we need to think about, but those 2 as their defensive kind of midfielders, I would really quite fancy Siddiqui and Xhaka to get the better of them. And if we did throw a Lefay in, because let's not forget how good Lefay is actually defensively and off the ball, and how much he does work. I would fancy our chances against them, and actually would be like you, Chris, a little bit disappointed if Mainu started, because he would go some way to combat that. I think the rest of it stays as it is. I don't think you can have a result and a performance as good as Forest's without keeping the same team. So I've kind of contradicted myself a little bit, but I just think for the reasons, Chris Rigg isn't our 4th choice centre midfielder. It's very much a squad game. He's been in there for a couple now, and I think he'll be rotated out just because of how much he's played. There's players who've come on who probably are absolutely itching to start, and I just think the game needs somebody with a bit more pace and power not necessarily work rate, because Chris Riggs' work rate is up there, but I just think it needs somebody with a little bit more physicality, and probably a little bit more nous and maybe a little bit more experience in terms of games in European top flights, because it is, like I say, it is still Manchester United. They're still coming up against, World Cup winners, and in terms of Casemiro, etc. So yeah, it just needs something a little bit more. So I've gone a long way of saying, I pretty much agree with Gav, having thought about it for half an hour before we started recording. So cheers, Gav.
It is funny though how we keep coming back to this conversation that it almost we end the sentences with, but it is Manchester United. But Gav, last one before we do predictions. How do you see it playing out? Do you see us, digging in, digging our trenches, edge of the box? Do you see us kind of waiting for that moment to catch them on the break? Do you think Man United's going to have 70% of the possession and it's just about us frustrating them? How do you see it all playing out?
It depends on a couple of things in terms of their selections. So obviously Ahmad had some issues, didn't he, with a family bereavement, so he didn't play the last game, and they went with Dalot as the wing back, and he presents a completely different challenge to what Ahmad does. If Ahmad starts, which I suspect he will, we've got to be very guarded about how much gaps we're leaving behind down that side. But at the same time,
he'll stick an own goal in, man, Gav. He'll kill one in for us. 20 yards.
Can you imagine if he even if it went off his arse? Can you imagine the reaction online? But I think ultimately it goes back to what I said before when I was talking about their sort of setup. We just have to go and do what we do all the time away from home, which is just go, be organised for 45 minutes, work them out a bit, then look at ways we can hurt them, but keep that threat on set players. We've almost become quite predictable, but unpredictable at the same time. Like I know we're going to be organised. I know we're going to sit in.
That's deep, Gav. I'm telling you.
I know we're going to be organised. I know we're going to sit in. I know that we're going to work hard. Those are all non-negotiables. But if we get throw-ins and we get, corner kicks and free kicks and things, we're going to be dangerous. And then later in games, we can harm them. So I'm predicting it to be more of the same, but they're not going to be able to see where the threat's coming from. What I would like to see is more of a counter-attacking threat, actually. I don't think we've seen much of that this season. Last year, we were doing all of those things, but we weren't springing the pass quickly and getting in behind, and we haven't seen a lot of that this season. I'm keen to see a little bit more of that because we're capable of it. We've got the players to do it. But I actually see this game playing out in a way which we've seen many recent away games. I do. I think we'll win. I always say that though, but I genuinely do. I just think we're playing these at a good time because he'll get the sack if they lose. That's how close they are.
Yeah, and I'm expecting some sort of ancient proverb from you, Bomber, to kind of explain this as well. But do you think it'll go the same way, or because actually talking about that, he's talking about improving us and catching them on the break. But Mayenda did a lot of that last season, didn't he? That you know, and it would almost need to be putting someone like that in on the left hand side to kind of give us that impetus when we do break quickly.
Yeah, it would. So you're quite right. Mayenda was doing that, but there's no reason that if we did move Lefay inside and put a Dinger out there that he couldn't do the same. He's been doing it in the Premier League for a good couple of seasons. So I echo what Gav's saying in terms of I'd like to see us away from home have a little bit more of a threat on the counter attack because it worked so well for us at the back end of or during the playoffs. How we kind of got to where we are, and actually I think, especially at the start of the season before teams start kind of working us out a little bit, it could be our biggest weapon and our biggest threat because we do have quick players on the break and we do have players now that can play those sorts of passes into the channels and get Premier League defenders turning and running the other way, which as a former defender myself, no, there's nothing more that you hate than being turned around and being forced to run back towards your own goal. But yeah, in terms of the game, I see it being the same. I think a lot of it depends on how the two, I was going to sound obvious, but a lot of it depends on how the two teams line up in terms of that midfield. We talked a lot about it, but I think, if it's Casemiro, Ugarte, and we have Lefay, Xhaka and
Siddiqui.
help me out, Chris. Yeah, Siddiqui. Then I think we've got a very, very good chance of winning that midfield and not necessarily needing to be a counter-attacking team. In terms of how the game goes, I think it very much depends on the first goal. So I'm going to say if we go 1-0 up early, I think we'll actually win 1-0, 2-0, 2-1 possibly. I think if Manchester United score first, they will, as the game goes on, as long as we carry on fighting and battling and trying to get back into the game as we have been for all the Premier League games so far this season, I think we'll snatch one. So I think if we score, I'm going to say if we score first, it's a 2-0 or a 2-1, and if they score first, it's a 1-0. I don't see us losing the game.
Wow, that's a big call. I mean, we've lost Gav, so that we've only got 2 predictions today. You're saying, so say that again.
All right, I'll get off. So no, I'll if we score first, it's a 2-0 win. If they score first, it's a 1-1 draw.
Right, interesting. Okay, because my prediction is going to be a goalless draw. Okay. I don't think Man United have got the confidence to kind of really, someone to try something special, and I think we're going to be so tight, and we're not going to be able to grab that goal. But it's the last point, Bomber, because we're both saying that our predictions are that we're going to go to Old Trafford and not get beat. Have we ever thought that? Ever?
Not
ridiculous.
Not that I can ever remember.
You just have to say more about us or Manchester United.
I think it's probably a mixture of both. It's a mixture of both. Like it's 2 teams that are at opposite ends of their kind of cycle of success, isn't it? We're very much on the up. We're very much flavour of the month at the minute, and Manchester United have been kind of dying a slow death for the last 6-7 years, if not longer. Whereas we've been going through a bit of a rebirth over the last 2 or 3. But yeah, I think the balance has never been tipped more in our favour for a game to go our way at Old Trafford, certainly in my lifetime, or that I can remember anyway.
Yeah. Well, you can tell we're excited because we've gone on for far longer than we intended. So apologies for that. And I just want to say, Bomber, thank you very much for your time as always, mate.
Thank you, mate. Good to be back.
Good stuff. And thanks again for everyone for listening. Don't forget, we'll have all the immediate reaction after the final whistle. We were talking about that up front. We should have a pod that should drop very soon after. We'll have all the reaction on the Roker Report website, so look out for all of that. And I'm off to look at the odds for an Ahmad own goal, actually. I'm going to give that a cheeky look up. But from us, it's bye for now.
Podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 350 plus undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.